God our Father, whose will it is that your people live in ordered society, inspire this nation with the spirit of truth and cooperation. Guide our leaders, especially those in the chamber, who serve as representatives of your people. At the beginning of November, we turned on lights to celebrate our independent nation. Now we will see the Christmas lights to celebrate the nativity of Jesus Christ. So the people of this land, with the lights that come from light, we walk no longer in darkness, but see you as the one who are light. As always, we pray that whatever is done will be done to your greater glory, through Jesus Christ, our Lord. Say the Lord's Prayer. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come. Thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen.
Start on time. Yeah. Okay. Probably was told that. Sorry. House is in session. Minutes. Minutes, please. House is in session. The minutes for Tuesday, the 27th of November.
Yeah, you have to indicate that.
Oh, not okay.
The minutes of this day.
Well, the minutes of meetings held on Tuesday, 27th of November 2018 is not in possession at this time. Can you move the motion, please?
I beg to move that the minutes be deferred.
Seconded. Question is that the minutes for the 27th of November be deferred. All members in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those against say no. I think the ayes have it.
Announcements by Your Honor, the Speaker. Messages from Her Excellency, the Governor General, petitions, and papers.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, on behalf of the Honourable Minister of Finance, Economic Affairs and Investment, I am commanded to lay the 2017 Annual Report and Financial Statements of the Central Bank of Barbados, Duties, Taxes and Other Payments, Exemption Order 2018.
Deputy Speaker, I am commanded to lay the audited financial statements of the Childcare Board for the year ending March 31st, 2017.
Government notices, private members' notices, notices of questions, reports from select committees, first readings of bills, statements by ministers, congratulatory and/or obituary speeches, personal explanations, motions for leave of absence, replies to questions, notices of motions for the adjournment of the House on matters of urgent public importance, orders of the day. Suspension there.
Standing orders.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, I beg to move that standing orders numbers 6, 16, 18, 20, 42, 5, 43, and 44 be suspended for the remainder of the day's sitting.
Seconded. Question is that those standing orders be deferred for the rest of the day's sitting. Members in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those against say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Private members' business.
Private member business is now the order of the day.
Order number 2, sir. In the name of the Honourable Member for Christchurch South, to move the passing of a resolution that the House accepts and adopts the report of the Public Accounts Committee 2013 to 2018.
Honourable Member for Christchurch South.
I'm obliged to you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. It is my duty and honor to move the resolution as indicated by the Clerk of the House. I don't propose to read it in its entirety, but to focus on a section of that resolution which now becomes salient and significant for the failing of the government of the day. And you will permit me, I hope, Your Honor, to read just a portion which says, this is in the recitals, and whereas the committee, and that is to say the Public Accounts Committee, having completed its work, sought to but was unable to lay its report in this honourable chamber, and whereas this committee made specific findings and recommendations which in the interest of transparency, accountability, and good governance ought to have been made known. And of course, you will hear the House asks that the said report of 2013 to 2018 be adopted on this day and accepted by this House. I did indicate to you, Your Honor, that the salient portion of the resolution relates to the inability of the opposition of the day, that is to say of the 2013 to 2018 session, to lay the report in this honourable chamber. I believe, therefore, that I am under something of an obligation to give the larger context which led to the opposition of the day being unable to do its work, the work that the people sent it to do. And permit me to quote from the said report as follows, Your Honor. The Auditor General, in his report for 2013, and I quote, observed that the National Housing Corporation was requiring advances of $2.9 million from the Ministry of Finance without parliamentary approval or without entering an agreement for the advances as contemplated by sections of the Financial Management and Audit Act, Chapter 5 of the Laws of Barbados and Regulations. That statement, Mr. Deputy Speaker, encapsulates a serious dereliction of public duty on the part of the government of the day. Just let me say in passing, Your Honor, that I think it was on the 20th of November, just 2 weeks ago, this House observed the Honourable Minister for Maritime Affairs come to this House, and he sought a supplementary to do work, much to my pleasure, within the constituency of Christchurch South, and more particularly at Oistins. For those members of the public who are curious, it was not a mere formality. He was doing what the law compelled him to do. That is to say, if a minister wishes to request public funds for any purpose or any specific purpose, he must come to this place, this House of Assembly, and ask that this House of Assembly should vote in approval of the monies which he seeks. And after the House votes for that, the monies are then lawfully transferred to his ministry so that he may pursue the work of the government. What we saw between 2013 and 2018, Your Honor, was a severe and drastic departure, not from a formality, but from a legal requirement. Here was a ministry of government requesting funds from another ministry of government, which is to say the Ministry of Housing, requesting a direct transfer of monies from the Ministry of Finance and bypassing this institution, this arm of the state. And I say it's an arm of the state deliberately, because this is not a statutory corporation that we have been sent to. This body was not set up by a statute. This body exists by virtue of the highest law in this land, the Constitution. And therefore, that is why those rules exist when it relates itself to the spending not of private monies, but the spending of public monies. We, Your Honor, are mere trustees of public monies. And it must now be considered a dark day in the history of this country when a ministry seeks to bypass this House in relation to the spending of $2.9 million, and the amount does not matter. If it were 29 cents, Mr. Deputy Speaker, it remains wrong. And it is no less wrong, or no more wrong, that it was in the amount of $2.9 million of taxpayers' money intended to be transferred almost literally from the coffers of one ministry, and I was tempted to say minister, from the coffers of one ministry into the coffers of another ministry. I suspect that some of my colleagues may be able to speak with authority as to whether it went from one ministry or whether it went from one minister to another minister. That is a matter for those who speak with greater authority, since I was an absentee in those dark days. Suffice it to say, the Public Accounts Committee met its...
So you want the word absentee?
Yes, I wasn't here.
Oh, you were not a member of the House at the time?
Yes, I was an absentee in those dark days. And suffice it to say, a number of witnesses were called by the Public Accounts Committee and gave evidence as to the transaction to which this report condescends, the bypassing of this House. Senior public officials from the National Housing Corporation came. Senior officials from within the public service came. All manner of man and woman came before that Public Accounts Committee to give evidence. But here, for the first time in the public life of Barbados, was the spectacle of ministers of the Crown. And I use the word absentee now. deliberately absenting themselves from the process and the procedure of the Public Accounts Committee. And worse, securing the services of a lawyer. And that letter that came to this place constituted a legal trespass. That is my view. That some lawyer or two lawyers or three write letters into this place seeking to give excuse for the failure and refusal of ministers of the Crown to consent to appear before a Public Accounts Committee to give evidence as to suspected impropriety in relation to the use and transfer of public funds between ministries. So let us indicate to the public, since the public has a vested interest in these matters, what is the role and function of that creature we call the Public Accounts Committee. Often in public life, a government is given such immense power under the Constitution that unless there is a check and a balance on that power, the government is then at risk of becoming a government of tyranny. And certainly, this prospect may always arise in relation to the spending of public monies. And so to obviate that course, that potential course in public life, the law established in this country a Public Accounts Committee. In ordinary parlance, I would say to you, Your Honor, that committee functions as a watchdog over government expenditures. A government may not spend as it pleases, and even if it wishes to spend as it pleases, it must receive the approval of this body, this constitutional body. And Your Honor, there are only three major constitutional bodies in this country, and I will repeat to you. It's the judiciary, the cabinet, and the parliament. Those are the three constitutional bodies that have ultimate power within this state. And there I repeat, the judiciary interprets the law, the cabinet manages the country from day to day, and this is the only body with the power to make laws. And when that ministry attempted to spend the monies, it ought to have come to this place so that this body could have given legal condemnation to that attempted expenditure. And that is why I make the point and emphasize the point of the importance of this place in which the people must always have a vested interest. And it is this place that established what is called the Public Accounts Committee. And it is not by any accident that that Public Accounts Committee is chaired by the Leader of the Opposition. You do not seize upon any member, and certainly not a member of government, because legally and politically and morally you cannot ask the government to watch itself. The exercise is objectively done only if a member of the House who is in opposition to the government sits in that important office of chairmanship of the Public Accounts Committee, so that it is no accident. And the Constitution seeks to ensure that that transparency and independence of thought should exist. And indeed, the Constitution gives to this House the power to regulate its conduct and its procedure. And indeed, the standing orders also speak to that Public Accounts Committee, the existence of that Public Accounts Committee constituting itself as a watchdog in relation to the public accounts, the public monies of this country. And it seems that the last government had no respect for this. And that is why we are here today. This report ought to have been laid a long time ago. I wonder if this Parliament owes the people of Barbados an apology for the lateness of the laying of this report. But we do not apologize for doing what is right. If we are late, this Parliament pleads guilty for being late. But we do not apologize for doing what is right, and it is right today that this report should be laid. I'm pleased to be speaking in the presence of the Leader of the Opposition, and I will pause and say that we probably have no doubt that he will sit in the exercise of this office as seriously as the law intends that he should so do. I want to say on behalf of my colleagues that this government does not fear the Public Accounts Committee. This government has no cause nor reason to fear the Public Accounts Committee. This is good and honest government, and I'm proud to be a part of it, Your Honor. Let the public understand that the purpose of the Public Accounts Committee is that it should instill an ethos of financial prudence, and that if the government departs from financial prudence, it is the Leader of the Opposition and his committee that writes a report which ultimately is delivered to Your Honor, so that it may be considered, so that the financial conduct of the government may be considered. And let the public also understand that that committee is bicameral and it is bipartisan. It embraces all parties who happen to be present in this House. And indeed, it embraces both chambers of this Parliament, this House and the Senate, so that the safeguards are several in relation to ensuring that public monies are properly safeguarded. I may say to you as well, Your Honor, that the Public Accounts Committee is deeply entrenched within the law, within the Constitution, and within the political conventions of this country. And that is why it remains a blot on the parliamentary life of this country when two, perhaps three ministers of government, and I repeat this, sought to disturb and disrupt the proceedings of this House, the proceedings of a lawfully constituted Public Accounts Committee, and to deliberately absent themselves from the proceeding. As I said before, it was not a private proceeding. It was an attempt on behalf of the people of this country to ensure that their public monies were being well expended. That is what it was about. And I say that there was never a worse written letter describing itself as a legal document. It is that document that contributed to the blot that now besmirches the public life of this country. The lawyers should be ashamed of themselves for intruding on this august institution, not to pursue private political interests, but to pursue integrity in the public life of this country. I say in the presence of the Leader of the Opposition that the Public Accounts Committee may on the face of it be concerned with financial accounts. But I say to him as well that those events may well reveal that those members may have thought that the Accounts Committee at the time was seeking an account of the state of their character, to run away from an inquiry in which public officials under them, I don't wish to be so invidious as to call names, Your Honor, and I won't, but I will call titles. Legal officers from within the National Housing Corporation came and gave evidence. Senior public servants within the service of the Public Service Commission came and gave evidence. High officials. And yet, the ministers, those persons who sit with ultimate executive authority within the ministry, failed and refused. I over here remember saying, what did they have to hide? If there was propriety in the spending of public monies, was it not easy and possible to come and say that there was propriety? Everyone in this country who has sat on a jury, everyone in this country who has read a case in the paper, would understand that if a man deliberately absents himself from an inquiry, does he not have something to hide? What is it that they had to hide, that the public officials were not so similarly disposed upon? Why did they not come? So today, Your Honor, we come to restore righteousness and the doing of right into the public life of Barbados. I don't know what sanctions the people of Barbados request or require. I know there was a public sanction on May the 25th, was it? 24th. Well, the result did come on the 25th. I know there was that sanction. And perhaps the people feel satisfied that through their will, the will of the people, that justice, a special jury, the Honourable Member for St. Michael says, a special jury. But I want to say to them, and I want to say in the presence of the Leader of the Opposition, that this Public Accounts Committee is so serious a body that through all Commonwealth countries with a common law tradition and a tradition of Westminster government, whether one likes it or not, Honourable Member for St. Michael East, but whether one likes it or not, under the law, the Public Accounts Committee Act, a person may be tried in a magistrate's court for refusing to attend, and he exposes himself to a penalty of 2 years imprisonment or the payment of $25,000 or both. The law intends that this Public Accounts Committee is to be treated as seriously as that there is sanction beyond this body and in the other body, in the court proper, where a person refusing to attend can be convicted in a court of law for that refusal. I have not read the letter from the lawyer. I don't know its content. But it is contemptuous. And on the subject of contempt, this House, under the presidency of Your Honor, has the power to find a person guilty of contempt of this House if he similarly refuses to attend before a sitting of the Public Accounts Committee. It is as serious as that. It is no political trifle, it's no game. It is not a matter for beating down the offices of private practitioners in fear. This House is intended to be a serious place, and it must remain a serious place. And Your Honor, I trust and I appeal to my colleagues on the government side to respect this House, to respect the traditions of this House, to respect ultimately the people of Barbados who have all sent us to this place on a serious mission. And so serious have been the people of Barbados that they sent us in abundant numbers. And not only did they send us in abundant numbers, but the corollary of that is that they dismissed the other side entirely. And I am convinced that that dismissal is related to this similar misconduct committed by the last government. And I suspect that is the punishment that was levied on that last government for disrespecting the laws and the organs of this honourable place. We call each other in here honourable men and women. And on that day, men lost their honour and men lost their entitlement to honour when they refused to abide by a simple invitation by a Public Accounts Committee to attend this house. And now we come to you on this date in December 2018, on the threshold of Christmas, with revelations as to the improprieties of the last government. And if the people of this country wish any vindication as to the action they took on May 24th, this report is but a small parcel of the abundant evidence against the last government. Again, I say this in the hearing and the presence of the leader of the opposition. Never again must this house descend into the abyss of impropriety as committed by the last government. This is a shameful time. That was a shameful time when an opposition of the Barbados Labour Party was frustrated in its attempt to bring propriety into the public life of Barbados and to bring propriety and to bring impropriety to the notice of the Speaker of this House. Never again must it happen. Your Honor, it is therefore, as I said, my duty and indeed my honor, if right is done all too late, to do right nonetheless. And I therefore ask this House to accept and adopt the report of the Public Accounts Committee 2013 to 2018. And with those few words, Your Honor, I'm obliged to you.
Honourable Member for St. James Central.
Mr. Speaker, sir, Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir, I rise to entirely.
Anybody second it? Anybody second it?
I beg to second.
Go ahead.
I rise, Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir, to entirely associate myself with the argument so eruditely set forth and expatiated upon by the Honourable Member who just took his seat, the member for Christchurch South. And as the Honourable Member spoke, Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir, I reflected on the fact that it was in, I believe, the last week of October of this year that I had cause to reflect on the fact that this report of the Public Accounts Committee of Barbados had not yet been laid, and it was during a debate on a matter relating to the Ministry of Housing and acquisition of land. And I reflected at that time, Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir, on the fact that there were substantive issues still alive in the memory and in the mind of the body politic of Barbados, and that the citizenry of this country still needed to have resolution to those issues that were so vigorously campaigned upon and put before the public during the course of the general election of 2018. And Mr. Speaker, sir, I remember distinctly that I spoke immediately before the leader of the opposition rose. And in my speech, sir, in the closing stages thereof, I pointed out that the Barbados Labour Party had campaigned, sir, on the need for the previous government to be penalized for presiding over a reprehensible state of affairs in the financial conduct of this country. That state of affairs, Mr. Speaker, sir, included but was not limited to reprehensible acts such as the abuse of the procurement process in certain statutory corporations, Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir, ministers usurping the role of boards, ministers violating statutory independence of boards, and those were the matters that were taking place in cathedra within the context of this House of Assembly. But ex-cathedra, outside the House of Assembly, Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir, there were matters as pernicious and vile as naked theft from citizens of the country, and Mr. Speaker, sir, suppression of information of all types relating to the public affairs of Barbados. And I felt then, sir, as I do now, that beyond the campaign, the public, as the member for Christchurch South, the Honourable member just made the point, the public spoke in an historically unprecedented manner and with an unprecedented voice, and that very intimately linked to the nature of the campaign and to the distillation of information related to the heinous practices that were taking place under the last administration, sir, that we had a very decisive voice, and that voice had to be heard. And I felt then, Mr. Speaker, sir, and I invited the Leader of the Opposition as a matter of public duty to do that which only he could do under the Constitution of Barbados, and that is to bring unanimity of purpose through his office by associating himself with the work done by the Barbados Labour Party team between 2013 and 2018 on the 24th of May, and making sure, Mr. Speaker, sir, that that Public Accounts Committee report, which was thwarted and stymied in this place by yet another reprehensible act, Mr. Speaker, sir, of the what I can only consider to be the abuse of the majority sometime in January or February of this year, so that it could not come to light in the immediate region of a pending general election. And Mr. Speaker, sir, the Leader of the Opposition spoke after me, and it is a matter of deep personal regret to me that he remained mute on those matters. He remained mute on the invitation to join in this process, and indeed to use his office as the instrument via which this matter was brought to the House. So I begin on the note, Mr. Speaker, sir, of thanking the Honourable member for Christchurch South for recognizing his public duty as a private member to do that which perhaps, Mr. Speaker, sir, might better have been done via a different route. But it has been done, and it has been done, Mr. Speaker, sir, in furtherance of the cause of the Barbados Labour Party's commitment to the people of this country that there will be transparency in public affairs. It is not for the first time that the Leader of the Opposition has spurned the efforts of the Barbados Labour Party, nor indeed, Mr. Speaker, sir, is it for the first time that the Leader of the Opposition has shattered the expectations of the public. But I am not on this particular point concerned unduly about those who chose a path of personal convenience above and beyond the rocky road of public duty. I say, Mr. Speaker, sir.
A point of order.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, unfortunately, my honourable friend out of the West is misleading the House in suggesting that the Leader of the Opposition, in his capacity as Chairman of the Public Accounts Committee, was loath to have these matters brought before the attention of the House. That is totally inaccurate. And I really would not want even to get into a debate as to why this matter is here today and how it arrived to this point, because I want to spare the honourable member, particularly so, and the wider party in office, the embarrassment of exposing that debate.
Mr. Speaker, sir, I presume I'm allowed to continue.
Proceed, yes.
And Mr. Speaker, the point is that the Auditor General's report, now having been laid and done so by the Honourable Member for Christchurch South, in spite of the fact that we do not now have the vehicle of the Leader of the Opposition to have brought that unanimity of purpose, it has been laid and it must be therefore forensically examined. The fact is, Mr. Speaker, sir, that the purposes of the examination by the Public Accounts Committee is a critical point of departure. The Public Accounts Committee, Mr. Speaker, sir, I'm seeing the Leader of the Opposition on his feet, but I'm not hearing his voice.
What do you raise?
I don't know on what point he has risen.
Point of order?
Would you have him sit down?
Point of order.
I didn't hear him, sir.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, the Honourable Member for St. James Central persists in misleading the House in an attempt to cast a mild aspersion on both the character of the Leader of the Opposition and his intentions with respect to matters related to the operations of the Public Accounts Committee. It is a fact that the Leader of the Opposition was approached by those who represent the government and asked if he would facilitate the government's bringing this matter to the attention of the Parliament at this time. I queried the legality and the appropriateness of that procedural approach. The advice which I was given by no less a person than the Honourable Attorney General representing the voice of the government was that should we delay in having the current Public Accounts Committee as now constituted to look at the matter of this report so that it may more appropriately and expeditiously...
There's a point of explanation or...
Explanation. I am trying to correct the misleading of the Honourable Member of St. James Central.
Because I don't find a point of order. If you want to explain...
But with all due respect, Mr. Deputy Speaker, misleading the House is a point of order, and I'm pointing to the matter and substance on which he's misleading the House.
I will accept a point of explanation.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, let him go ahead.
Continue, member.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir, and I assure the Honourable Leader of the Opposition I would trouble him no further in this speech. I want to say, Mr. Speaker, sir, that the critical point is not so much the Leader of the Opposition, it is the purpose of having the Public Accounts Committee examination being done. It has been noised abroad, Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir, and inaccurately so, that the purpose behind the Public Accounts Committee examination was a political purpose. Not true. It might have had a political effect, but the fact of the matter is, Mr. Speaker, sir, that when one studies, or not even studies, when one gives even the most cursory of reading to the records, the transcripts of the Public Accounts Committee process, it will be recognized that the chairman, myself, when questioning the current Attorney General and several others, would have repeatedly made the intervention or made the observation at the start of witnesses being questioned that this was not simply a matter, Mr. Speaker, sir, of an investigatory or an inquisitorial type approach, but that we wanted to come to an understanding of procedural flaws, procedural failing, and how we might appreciate what best practices could be so that we could make a body of recommendations that will enable future governments of Barbados to be able to be guided in the best possible way. Mr. Speaker, sir, when one looks at the report of the Public Accounts Committee, one finds contained therein a body of such recommendations. So that, as a point of departure, I want to make the point, sir, that, for example, one of the concerns raised in the questioning was the fact that for a period of approximately 20 months, the sum of $2.46 million would have been transferred from the Ministry of Finance under the arrangements that then existed to the Ministry of Housing without parliamentary oversight or parliamentary approval, so that the members elected to the House of Assembly were kept in a state of Stygian darkness and gloom about the fact that for a period of 20 months, that which equated to approximately $50 million was transferred from the Ministry of Finance to the Ministry of Housing without parliamentary approval. Nor, Mr. Deputy Speaker, were there any agreements put in place as is required under the Financial Management and Audit Act to ensure that the money that was being moved was treated in the best possible manner by way of the National Housing Corporation. And to what do I refer? The evidence taken reflected that a senior officer of the National Housing Corporation carried in her bosom the understanding that this money was a loan, a grant, and that it was a grant, Mr. Deputy Speaker. It was a grant, according to her understanding, because of the fact that there was nothing to say in writing that it was a loan. A state of confusion therefore applied in the mind of the officer who was dealing with the money. Transfer of the money, however, sir, was also a matter put before the Auditor General himself, as well as a senior official of the Inland Revenue, who then both made the case that it was not in fact to be treated as a grant, but rather as an advance, and that in keeping with the Financial Management and Audit Act, advances were supposed to be subject to an agreement for repayment in writing. But no such agreement existed in these circumstances, Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir. So that which the Public Accounts Committee concerned itself with was, for example, that breakdown in procedure that allowed $50 million to move from the Ministry of Housing, from the Ministry of Finance to the National Housing Corporation without reference to the elected members of Parliament of Barbados, without the knowledge of the elected members of Parliament of Barbados, Mr. Speaker, sir, and in circumstances where there was no ability on the part of the National Housing Corporation to say definitively how that money was supposed to be treated, whether there was a duty to repay it, or whether in fact it was a grant given and there is no duty to apply to repay. Parliament, Mr. Speaker, sir, as the Honourable Member for Christchurch South has made clear, must be allowed to have oversight of these matters. And above and beyond that, Parliament must be in a position to know that these things are happening, especially in circumstances where the statutory corporation that benefited, in this case the National Housing Corporation, was at all material times between 2011 and 2013 insolvent. It was technically insolvent, Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir, and incapable therefore of paying its bills, but yet is getting the benefit of money in circumstances where the Auditor General, whose report triggered the investigatory process, the Auditor General is expecting that a situation will prevail in which the National Housing Corporation should be in a position to be able to repay the money that it is benefiting from. Now, Mr. Deputy Speaker, that is clearly a tragedy, and it was something that the committee had to look into and had to make recommendations upon. In similar vein, Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir, it became clear that in 2007, the National Housing Corporation received the benefit of a recapitalization of $20 million, which cleared its overdraft at the time. I believe, sir, at that stage you were not still directly concerned with the National Housing Corporation, but you had a history there. and it required no further subventions from government. Between 2007, Mr. Deputy Speaker, and 2013, this is where I make the point about us understanding from the procedure, not just the politics, because the country has been for the last year or so titillated by the politics. But the larger issue for Barbadians, I respectfully submit to this House, is the procedural inadequacy and irregularities that have put the National Housing Corporation into a state of peril. Its very existence and capacity to function has been compromised by financial recklessness and lawlessness unbridled in high places, Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir. And between 2007 and 2013, the National Housing Corporation employed 200 people or more. 200 people or more between 2007 and 2013. I made the point that it was known, and the evidence reflects, that in 2011, the corporation was known by its management to be in a state of insolvency. But yet, between 2012 December and January of 2013, over 50 people were employed further. And the question therefore has to arise as whether it is right on the eve of a general election. Note the dates, Mr. Speaker, sir. Mr. Deputy Speaker, January 2013, December 2012. A general election took place in Barbados in February of 2013. On the eve of a general election, 50 people come into a corporation whose future cannot be sustained because the corporation is insolvent.
These are additional people.
Additional people whose financial well-being cannot be sustained because the corporation is insolvent. But the people of Barbados, those 50 people in particular, their families upon whom they depended for sustenance, those people, sir, were treated like pawns in a power game. The optics is what mattered. We have taken people in. We have given you a job. The fact did not seem to resonate where it should have resonated, that by March, April, or May of that same year, the job was unsustainable, that there was no way that the job could have been kept. But on the eve of a general election in Barbados, Mr. Speaker, sir, that was the approach taken. And the report at page 72, at paragraph 191, Mr. Deputy Speaker, makes reference to the body of recommendations. And in that particular regard, the committee recommended, and I quote, that where statutory corporations are insolvent, that boards shall take no action to expand employment without the approval of the Ministry of Finance and the Ministry of the Civil Service. So that the duty that was discharged by the Barbados Labour Party's opposition, Mr. Speaker, sir, while in opposition, was to try to lend this country a lens through which to look, to see how governance could be better done in Barbados, to see how this business of governing the society could be done better and more effectively. And that safeguards were recommended to the extent that the Ministry of Finance and relevant bodies, sir, within the civil service must now be put in a position where they can superintend the process of a renegade and runaway minister who may feel that it is fit, meet, and proper, or an uncontrolled and unbridled board that feels it is fit, meet, and proper to bring on staff on the eve of an election for purely political purposes in circumstances where that is not sustainable. It compromises the financial well-being of the same people you've employed, Mr. Speaker, sir, and it compromises the ability of the board that you have a moral duty and a duty in law to preside over the well-being of. And that was where the commission, that is where the commission's work was being done. And Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir, I make the point as well that if you go through this report For example, at page 61 of the report, reference is made to the fact that the Minister of Finance, as he then was, executed a contract for the financing of the grotto without the Solicitor General and/or the Attorney General of Barbados certifying the said contract as being fit for signature, and without prior consideration by and approval of the Cabinet for an increase in contract price of $9.85 million, up from $18 million, sir, for the construction of the grotto. And the committee, sir, having heard evidence of that nature, and as the Honourable Member for Christchurch South has said, having not just heard evidence, but evidence from public officers at the highest level in the civil service, having heard the evidence, the committee was not concerned about the politics of the thing, because it is clear from the evidence that a politician acted in a way that a politician ought perhaps not properly to act. The issue for the committee, Mr. Speaker, sir, was what was the recommendation that we can make to the public of Barbados. And in the report at page 72, while in opposition, not yet having the reins of government in our hands, Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir, the recommendation written and put before the House was that the committee recommended that ministers of governments must not be allowed to sign contracts purporting to bind the government or expose it to legal and/or financial liability in the absence of a review and approval of the Solicitor General or the Attorney General, and in the absence of approval of the Cabinet. And the fact of the matter is, Mr. Deputy Speaker, that the records of the committee reflect the evidence is that even before the matter relating to the grotto went to Cabinet, the fist of the Minister of Finance, as he then was, found itself on a document leaving a signature that committed the country to the payment of the increase, Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir, before the Cabinet had benefit of sight of the process. And therefore, Cabinet could not have approved the process. Now, those things, Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir, have a political context, yes. But first and foremost, the business of the Public Accounts Committee, under the leader of the opposition then, she who is now Prime Minister of Barbados, was a business to try to identify where there were procedural errors and procedural flaws, where there were breakdowns in process, and to leave Barbados in a position where we would be better off by virtue of having in our possession a body of recommendations that were aimed and designed and intended to make sure that the public of Barbados, as we went forward into the business of governing this country, would be able to be guided appropriately. Not satisfied, we didn't limit ourselves just to the grotto, we went to a number of other areas. For example, in Lancaster and St. James. In Lancaster and St. James, where, Mr. Speaker, sir, the Minister of Housing at the time, the member for St. Lucie, intruded into the day-to-day affairs of the National Housing Corporation to the financial detriment of the National Housing Corporation. And that was reflected in the minutes of the board meeting, Mr. Speaker, sir, the 451st board meeting of the corporation on the 14th of August 2013 in the matter of what has been called a land swap at Lancaster number 2 with a company in Barbados, a private sector company in Barbados. The company get the land from National Housing. And the directors of the National Housing Corporation had recommended that a price for the land in question, which at the time was owned by the NHC, was supposed to be $65 per square foot based on valuations received. But the general manager of the National Housing Corporation, in evidence, informed that the minister indicated that the price of $35 as opposed to $65 would do. And the minister said, "Don't water when it's $65, $35 would do." Mr. Speaker, sir? And the debt owing by National Housing, Mr. Deputy Speaker, to another private sector company was $1,145,357 plus interest. And the size of the land in question was 3,021 square meters, or 32,291 square feet, leading to a value of $2,098,000 as opposed to $1,130,000, which meant that the National Housing Corporation entered a land swap, receiving $30 per square foot less of financial disadvantage to the tune of $968,000 Barbados currency, Mr. Speaker, sir. And Mr. Deputy Speaker, the Commission recognized that there is politics in that, but that was not the purpose of the work of the Commission. The purpose of the work of the Commission was to not just to say, this is what we have found, I'll go on a platform and say that's what we found. We went beyond that and had a body of recommendations which included this matter. What was the requirement as a result of this matter that the Commission deliberated upon? The Commission recommended, Mr. Deputy Speaker, that action be taken, and I quote, for the benefit of the Leader of the Opposition. Because I know I'm not going to trouble him. I want him to understand that this is a holistic business. And all, Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir, all in Barbados, bar none, are being asked now to step up to the plate and to pull their fair share of weight, illuminating things which are wrong and helping the country to come to Christian understanding about those ways in which we could follow a better path to progress and rebuilding of this country. And I spare nobody in saying, sir, that this is a national endeavor. And it is not good enough, sir, that members on this side be seen in Parliament to be doing the work by themselves. All must be doing it. And Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir, the committee recommended, and I quote, that further action be taken by the appropriate organs of the government of Barbados by way of investigation, with a view to making further recommendations where appropriate and, if necessary, for the instituting of criminal and or civil proceedings against any individual whose conduct has caused the Crown, that's the government and the people, has caused the Crown to suffer any loss. That was the recommendation of the committee. So that when in January or February of this year, a motley crew used this side of the well of the House to block and to obstruct the process of the Labour Party opposition, Mr. Speaker, sir, they did not do so with the interests of the people at heart. They did so because this is the type of action that was supposed to be suppressed and repressed and to cause the people of Barbados to be oppressed. And I am saying respectfully, Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir, that now the die has been cast. And it is for this government to ensure that these recommendations contained herein are seen to have the light of day. But we didn't end there. That was not sufficient. We went further. I remember the night well, because we toiled in the morning from about 9 or 10 and did not end till it was about 2 a.m. The Honourable Member for Christchurch East said closer to 3. He was present, Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir. We went through the day, into the night, and into the following morning, working on the body of recommendations in order to bring them to the Honourable Parliament of Barbados, working then, as we do now, tireless, long, merciless hours in the interest of the people of the country. And we said, Mr. Deputy Speaker, that the committee further recommends that where appropriate, all necessary legal steps be taken against individuals whose conduct has constituted misconduct in public office in order to recover any compensation due and owing to the Crown and arising as a result of losses sustained from such misconduct. So that if a man decide that he is going to juke himself, let me use the parlance, the ordinary vernacular of the land, he is going to juke himself in a discussion about a sale of land and flex his political muscle so that the state does not get in a sale transaction that which the state ordinarily otherwise would be entitled to get. For whatever reasons known best to him, he decided that the state could do without that money. Even if the money is $900,000 that will keep a few more civil servants employed in Barbados today, then, Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir, there must be a way of pursuing that individual so that the $900,000 comes out of... That is what the recommendation was about. So that what we say today, sir, is entirely consistent with what we were saying when we were in opposition, toiling through the night, in an effort, sir, to make sure that justice would rain down on this land, and that fairness would prevail yet again in Barbados. Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir, it is a matter that is near and dear to every living person in this country, and that is why I say again that all, bar none, must be involved in the process. It is not a matter for luxury. It is not a matter for options. It is a matter to say, look, here is where I can be proactive and I can help the country to go forward by participating in a process. I don't care who gets vexed with me or how often I'm interrupted, Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir, because I stand and fall on that matter, squarely, uncompromisingly. I will not flinch. The people of Barbados put us here, 30 of us, in order to help reshape the destiny of this country. All 30. And we should not be starting out by disappointing them, Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir. It is not within the purview of any one member in here to be able to initiate the necessary legal action recommended by the committee. It is within the purview of the government as a whole. But there are procedures and processes that must be followed.
Right.
And those procedures and processes, I have heard the Honourable Member for St. Andrew on the floor of this House recommit himself as the most senior member of the Barbados Labour Party, Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir, to those procedures and processes. I myself have recommitted myself, even in this speech, to those procedures and processes. I have heard other members in here, the Honourable Member for St. James North speaks incessantly on the need, in the House and outside of the House, on the need for us to make sure that we do all within our purview to make sure that certain people in Barbados do not go scot-free. But this work, sir, that we are debating here, Mr. Speaker, sir, this didn't just happen overnight. This was a few years of work by a leader of the opposition and a team of people who took umbrage and decided that this was not just about politics. And that's why when we called in the people to give evidence, we started off by letting them know, look, we want your advice above and beyond this, Mr. Civil Servant. Above and beyond what you're telling us of what happened, tell us also how you feel your ministry could be run more effectively. Tell us how you feel there could be greater accountability. Tell us where the best practices are in the world and how we fell short of them. That was the kind of dialogue that took place, sir. And frankly, I am proud to have been given the opportunity to have been part of that committee that did that type of work in this unprecedented way. And if there's a shame, the shame is, Mr. Speaker, sir, that this committee report was stopped and blocked before we could come to the House when we came to the House with it early this year. As the Honourable Member for Christchurch South has said, it has come. And that it has had to come through a private member on the government side is unfortunate. But I say to you, Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir, that it must be given light of day. It is a bad thing that a committee has to note that a chairman of the National Housing Corporation chaired a board meeting on Friday the 19th of February 2013 and was present when an acting general manager of the National Housing informed the board that a construction company in Barbados had not submitted any further information on a development, in this case a development at Exmouth. And there's no evidence in the minutes of that meeting that the chairman of the board shared with the board and the management of the National Housing the fact that he, as chairman, received a letter on the previous day from the then Minister of Housing directing that Cabinet on the 14th of February had instructed the termination of the contract with the same company. And And when you check the records, Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir, the confirmed minutes of Cabinet reveal no such instruction. So a minister goes and tells a board chairman, take a contract from Mr. X and give it to Mr. Y. Because Mr. X is not able to perform the contract and Cabinet has agreed to take it from him. And lo and behold, when the Cabinet Secretary calls for the confirmed minutes of the meeting of the Cabinet, the minutes of the Cabinet reveal that no such decision was ever taken. No such discussion was ever held in the Cabinet. But a minister willfully and knowingly and probably with malice aforethought went and represented inaccurately and falsely a position of the Cabinet of Barbados, the supreme decision-making body of the country, in order to move a contract with substantial financial value from one entity to another. And in those circumstances, sir, the committee did not just hear evidence. The committee was not satisfied to just identify the politics and the politicians. The committee then put in recommendations. And I know you, Mr. Deputy Speaker, will ask, well, what were the recommendations on that? Apart from the fact that somebody probably should see a little time in St. Philip. The committee recommended that board chairmen must not act unilaterally in the exercise of their functions and powers, and must at all times act pursuant to their duty to appraise all other members of respective boards of any and all actions undertaken and or statements made in the name of the board, and that ministers of the Crown must be scrupulous in exacting in relation to their interaction with statutory boards falling under ministerial purview. Well, it's also all very well and good, sir, in finessed language. But it means that there must now be a body of rules that control board chairmen and control, quite frankly, ministers. And I want to say to this House, and I want the people of Barbados listening to what has come from this House to understand clearly what I am saying to them. That for the first time in the history of this country, there are ministers on the front bench of a government who are saying with one voice and with no equivocation whatsoever that we are now prepared to be held to a higher standard of accountability than any other body of cabinet before. And that we are going to make sure that there is a process of governance in Barbados that ensures that never again should a member of a cabinet be allowed to go and represent that cabinet said something or decided something or did something when cabinet never did such a thing, and that there are financial consequences to flow, but that minister is not held accountable. That type of behavior, sir, was always possible. But the problem in Westminster governance is that there are a number of conventions that we bring down from England. We believe, Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir, in this thing called conventions. But conventions are really gentlemen's and ladies' agreements. If you are not a gentleman or a lady, but a rogue and a rascal, then the convention means nothing. Because you're going to do what you feel like doing and get away scot-free with it. And we are saying, therefore, sir, that we are now prepared to go where no other government in Barbados' history has had to go before, but we will go there. We will bind each other to accountability and transparency, because, sir, the country cannot ever again be put in a situation where you are confronted with a man saying to you from the private sector, I lost 20 or 30 million dollars because of the fact that a minister decide or somebody in high place decide to do whatever he feel like doing and breach a contract with me in order to give work to somebody else who he prefers. And there's no evidence that cabinet approved that process. We are saying, sir, that when you behave that way, you expose the whole country, you expose the reputation of the country as a jurisdiction within which to do business. When you behave that way, Mr. Speaker, sir, you help people to understand why they are today, as regrettable as it is, people from the last administration who cannot look outside their house with comfort, and one or two who wear additional pieces of clothing around their ankle. Jewelry. And these things, Mr. Speaker, sir, destroyed, not threatened to, destroyed the image and reputation of Barbados. And our task as a committee was not just to go into the politics of the findings, because this is the first, there are only two, as I know of, two public accounts committees since independent Barbados, sir, that did this type of work. One with the St. Joseph Hospital, and secondly this one. But this one transcends the St. Joseph Hospital one, Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir, because this one has left Barbados and anybody who's serious about government in Barbados with a body of recommendations that over the course of the next few years we must now be able to flesh out into new rules that govern financial management in this country, govern the audit process in this country, govern the public procurement process in this country, Mr. Deputy Speaker, and govern and regulate the way in which boards statutory boards in Barbados and indeed cabinet ministers function.
Number one, I'm loath to give you additional time because I'm really enjoying your speech.
I do not want additional time, Mr. Speaker, sir. I want to stay within the rules.
The rules say they must complete.
I am going to thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir. I'm going to thank you for being a very patient and indulgent Deputy Speaker. And in closing, I ask this House, sir, to continue to give the fullest possible forensic assessment and support to the recommendations of this Public Accounts Committee.
You're obliged. You're obliged. Member for St. Michael West, Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. And let me begin by offering compliments to my honourable friend from the city of Bridgetown, who seems to have acceded to the position of leader of government business in this chamber. I do not know why my honourable friend, my honourable good-natured friend from St. James North would have lost the job. But I do compliment my honourable friend from the city, as I said, for this measure of elevation. Quite clearly from the numbers present here and the punctual start this morning, Mr. Deputy Speaker, we are under military rule, which seems to be a good thing here. Now, my honourable friend from St. James Central chooses very seldomly and irregularly to condescend to put in an appearance in this honourable chamber. When he does,
that's a reflection. That's a reflection, which we.
If that's a reflection, you want me. If that's a reflection, and you want me to take it back,
remember,
Mr. Deputy Speaker, I take back that reflection which suggested that the honourable member from St. James Central is seldom here and chooses to be regularly absent. I take that back. But, Mr. Deputy Speaker, when he does descend upon this chamber, he is usually full of sound and fury, all of which is not empty. And your liberality today, Mr. Deputy Speaker, allowed him to wax eloquent and to range wide in those things he chose to say. But I note your observation that my comment was a reflection, which is unworthy of this chamber.
Right.
I cannot say that I similarly noted any such observation when he reflected negatively on the leader of the opposition in relation to the matter before us today. But let me make a few points in the 30 minutes which I am allotted. The report of this committee and its focus, that falls on a few matters of extreme significance. The focus of the recommendations of this report speak to all that is bad about government in a democracy such as ours. It doesn't matter whether government is B, D, S, U, or P. It speaks to all that is bad about government in our type of political context. So, Deputy Speaker, you share my view, I am sure, that the people's interests must always be primary, must always be paramount. The people's interests and pursuit thereof cannot simply be incidental to the policies of government while being deliberately crafted to serve the interests of politicians. That is one of the things that is extremely wrong about the practice of politics in Barbados. That too often, and this report and its findings, its investigation suggests this, that the interests of the people of Barbados are only incidentally served often by government policy. That is what this report suggests with reference to the last administration. People's interests only incidentally served, while those of the politicians, ministers of government, are deliberately crafted through the formulation and implementation of that policy. And that is what is bad about government in any situation such as ours. Any effort to correct that is to be applauded. Any effort to correct that will be always supported by the person who sits in this seat over here today, Mr. Speaker. And this honourable member, now on his feet, is very appreciative of the fact that the government brought, though through a private member's resolution, this report before this honourable chamber today. I was enthusiastic in dialogue with representatives from the other side that this be done in this way so as to not further delay its coming to this chamber. The honourable member St. James Central has done a disservice to the leader of government business on the other side, because he's now made me very skeptical about entering into any arrangements with the government side, which later and subsequently may be made by spokesmen from the other side to reflect negatively on myself. I'm very, very serious about that particular one. So, Mr. Speaker, Deputy Speaker, the interests of the people must be paramount. And I think the thrust of this report calls us back to that precept in our parliamentary practice and in our governance, that the people's interests must always be paramount, not incidental, and certainly not become secondary, subject to deliberately crafted policies designed to serve the interests of politicians. This is what this report is saying, and that represents all that is bad about government. And if the intention of government in bringing this measure to this House today is to deal with that type of issue, then we're doing a good thing in this House. notwithstanding the honourable member who last spoke and his efforts to weave politics around this and to score some dubious advantage. Mr. Deputy Speaker, I also believe ministers who transgress should not have the protection of the office of the Prime Minister. And in reading this report, one wonders where the Honourable Prime Minister of Barbados was, the Chairman of the Cabinet of Barbados, when all of this went down. Ministers who transgress in this way should never find they have the comfort and protection of the office of the Prime Minister. I'm sure that with this current administration, that will never happen, not with this Prime Minister. They should never have the protection, the comfort of cabinet support. And clearly one has to wonder, where were the other members of cabinet when a Minister of Housing and a Minister of Finance could transgress in these ways? Where were the other members of cabinet? And why are not their voices on public record as expressing that this type of behavior is beyond undesirable, but that it is also reprehensible? Unless one comes to the conclusion that in the Cabinet of Barbados at the day they obtain a culture that conduces to this type of thing. Well, the electorate of Barbados spoke in glowing terms, and yes, with a 30-0 result at the polls, that type of culture obtaining in the Cabinet of Barbados is not to be tolerated, and they dismiss the entire cabinet along with the rest of their parliamentary colleagues. And I believe that should this reoccur, and I have no reason to believe that it will or should under the current leadership on the other side, but should this reoccur, I believe with all my heart that Barbadians now are sufficiently informed and seized with a sense of power that if this occurs, we will see the type of election result occur again in Barbados as we witness on May 24th of this year. So they shouldn't benefit from the protection of Prime Minister or Cabinet or even party, not for transgressions such as these. And 30-0 was a mandate to this administration to make sure that that type of thing never happens again. Mr. Deputy Speaker, what we're dealing here is not simply a breach of regulations, not simply a breach of regulations, as suggested by the Honourable Member for St. James. This goes beyond a breach of regulations. This goes beyond a breach of laws. What we have here playing out, as reported in the findings of this committee pursuant to their investigations, is that there were people in the bowels of the government of Barbados, principals in the government of Barbados elected by the people, appointed by a Prime Minister, meeting weekly, who had connections out there, whose interests they sought to serve. And it reminds us, Mr. Deputy Speaker, that we are here not about serving the interests of our connections out there, and that we have to be careful with those connections. Because some of those connections are not given to nobility of service. They're not given to the cause of the people. They don't lay their lives on the line. Those connections are out there. They are in the business of making money. And some of them will employ unscrupulous methods and measures in an attempt to make that money. And if part of the pathway to profit is by making connections with ministers of government, they will not be averse to doing that. And herein, therefore, in this report is a warning to all who sit on the front bench of government today, that we have to be careful with the connections that are about us. I'm not accusing, Mr. Deputy Speaker, anybody on the front bench of the government of anything. I'm simply saying what this report tells us is that we have to be careful with connections. And I'm expressing that caution. So it's not just a breach of... We need, and I agree with the member for St. James Central on this. Like I said, not everything he says is empty. We need to see the business. We need to see to the business of how we can better circumscribe ministerial power and ministerial discretion in Barbados today. We need to be careful as to how we treat to the business of ministerial discretion and ministerial power in Barbados today. There are too many stories of ministers of finance and others who abuse what measure of discretionary power is afforded to them, especially when it comes to things like waivers on taxes and stuff like that. And in this report, clearly in this report, we have indiscreet use. And I say that not only to be, I say that to be charitable. As a bit of a euphemism, in this report, we have clear evidence of indiscreet use of ministerial power for whatever reasons and in the interests of whomsoever. But if you read the report, Mr. Deputy Speaker, when you get a chance, I'm sure you have a copy. I got one last week after our sitting here, and I've been able to read it. And really in my speech today, I basically plan to just refer to several extracts from the report. But the honourable member for St. James Central transgressed a bit and got me a little bit.
I must say, I remember that you're really matching the crease, because I think you're batting on the crease constantly, and we want you to rise above.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, you may not know much about cricket, but you observe that I'm matching the crease. Many batsmen today bat out of the crease.
So this is where you're batting today?
And it depends on the conditions of the wicket.
I see.
And it depends on the caliber of the bowling coming from the other end. And today I think I must bat out of the crease.
No, we want you to bat in the crease today.
A little bit.
We just want you to bat in the crease today. Let's take it easy.
Now we don't hear a sides here, but the honourable member for St. James Central is saying that I'll get another chance to battle the crease because there's a private member's bill coming that you have to resign your seat before you cross it. That's not news to me, Mr. Deputy Speaker. I already spoke to that in here. Those guys on the other side should be concerned about that. Those guys on the other side should be concerned about that because it will keep them in their seats.
Don't hear a sides, member. Please don't listen to our sides, because we cannot hear.
I am not hearing a sides.
Let's take this to the resolution.
I am not at all hearing a sides. I am simply saying that I might get another chance. I am simply saying that I might get another chance to speak to these issues when the private member's resolution comes to this Parliament, that members cannot cross the floor unless they resign their seat. Mr. Deputy Speaker, that should be of concern to the other side. And I said it months ago. I said it months ago. And we really shouldn't anticipate certain
let us hear the honourable.
We really shouldn't anticipate certain legislation. We certainly shouldn't anticipate how others should vote. But I want to see if when that comes, if they will support that. Tell you behave. So, Mr. Speaker, we got to look at how we can better circumscribe the behavior of ministers with respect to discretion and use of power. Another thing with which I agree with the Honourable Member of St. James Central, and I said it myself long ago, I said it here a week after I came over this side replying to the mini budget of the day, and that is, we know to some extent who must pay the price to get us out of this mess, this economic mess that we are in. We know who must pay the price. And to some extent, we have been told by the government what that price is likely to be. My question then, and I repeat it today, in agreement with the member of St. James Central, we want to know who is going to pay the price to get, who's going to pay the price for getting us into this mess in the first place, and what that price is going to be. Barbadians do not want lip service on that issue. Barbadians do not want grandstanding on that issue. The question is a serious one. We know who has to pay the price to get us out of this mess. Who is going to pay the price for getting us into it, and what price will that be? And in a sense, the contents of this report revolve around that issue, where governors feel that they can do whatsoever they please with the resources of the people and irrespective of regulations, serving the interests of others while serving a detriment to the taxpayers of Barbados. So all that is bad about government is reflected in this report today. I want to invite this government, Mr. Deputy Speaker, to take a public stand on a couple of matters. If you read the background to the report of the Public Accounts Committee, there are a couple of issues that this government needs to take a public stand on. There was a question as to whether or not meetings of the Public Accounts Committee should be conducted public. There's an admission that there's a conflict in the regulation. The laws which govern the operations of the Public Accounts Committee and the standing orders of Parliament. And you have in one instance a prescription that evidence taken by the committee should not be made public before a report comes to Parliament, while in another instance, conflicting, you have a situation where the regulation suggests that evidence should be heard in public. And apparently that was not resolved. We need to know what is the public position on that to be taken publicly by this administration. Now the issue, Mr. Speaker, is whether or not ministers of the Crown and members of Parliament could be summoned to come to give witness before this committee. All that is in this report. These matters were never fully resolved. The last administration, allegedly in an attempt to frustrate the work of the Public Accounts Committee for whatever reasons, did not undertake to determine those matters. The clerk of this Parliament gave an opinion on the matter of MPs and ministers appearing before the Public Accounts Committee, and his opinion was that the committee had every right to ask them to come to give evidence. He made a reference to other jurisdictions in the Commonwealth and one or two here in the Caribbean, which support the view, perhaps to varying extent. The difference may be that in the case of Trinidad, they could be summoned. In the case of New Zealand, a Commonwealth country, they could be invited but that it was the House of Assembly that had to enforce the order for them to appear. But these things were never fully resolved before this Public Accounts Committee. And I'm inviting the administration now, bringing this report here, to take a public stand with reference to how the procedures are to be regulated. In the absence of clear directive from the House, in the absence of the appropriate intervention from the House through the Speaker, the committee proceeded on its work and took evidence, summoned the ministers to appear who have not yet appeared. If I understand the honourable members in James Central, there may be other summonses coming to them for which they may not have the option not to appear. And those summonses not from this chamber or from any Public Accounts Committee, but that's a matter for those folks there. Now, the movement of money in Barbados, government money, public money I should say, should not be shrouded in secrecy. That is why we have legislation. It should not be a question as to public servants who administer disbursement of expenditure not knowing whether the money is a loan or a grant. But all of this is in the report. That money is dispersed from the Ministry of Finance, the Ministry of Housing, by extension the National Housing Corporation. It is understood by some to be a grant, by others to be a loan, and that is a confusion. The regulations under which we serve provide for clarity as to procedure and to clarity as to how these things are to be understood and managed. And if you look at page 5, and I really would take the time to read these things today, but if you look at page 3 and section 5, you will see that it deals with that in very, very, very clear terms. The report deals with the method of award of contracts. Now, I have said before, Mr. Deputy Speaker, and I would probably just take a minute to repeat it today, I believe we need to move to a stage where we do have engaged and properly instituted the Office of Contractor General in Barbados. In some jurisdictions, that Contractor General actually has a lot of say in whether or not a contract should be awarded by the government to a private sector entity. I'm not advocating that. I believe those who are elected and charged with cabinet responsibility by appointment should be the ones who determine the feasibility of certain aspects of contracting with private sector entities. And that should not be taken away from those who are charged with executive responsibility. But certainly, Contractor General that helps to keep an eye, has the capacity through regulatory framework to scrutinize, to intervene, to inform the public, to inform this honourable chamber as to what is happening with reference to contracts. You, Mr. Speaker, a man of the world. You are a man of the street. You're a man of the people, Mr. Deputy Speaker. You hear these stories out there about this body getting this contract, body getting this contract, body getting from this body for various reasons. We need to make sure that all of that, to the extent that it is fully possible, is eliminated, so that there'll be clarity around the business of award of contracts by government in Barbados. When inaccuracies are provided to the executive or to the public or even to this House, when infelicities are unearthed, when imprudence is being demonstrated, a Contractor General will have a voice, will have a say, and will be able to input and impact the process such that the people of Barbados and their representatives here are always as informed as they can be and as they ought to be. So I suggest that we need that. This report refers to an award of contract to Rotherly Construction, apparently by proper and appropriate process. An award of contract for Exmouth. You know where Exmouth is, Mr. Deputy Speaker? I'll tell you when we're done. An award of contract to Rotherly Construction. This report suggests that changes were made after that contract was awarded to Rotherly, and by ministerial intervention and outside of the context of proper regulations and procedure, that contract was awarded to another entity. I think it's Pre-Conco, whoever the principals around that might be. Ministerial urging and instructions. And Mr. Deputy Speaker, the report seems to suggest without the approval or knowledge of Cabinet that this type of thing went down. And the contract is rewarded to BJ Investments, whoever they are. First I heard about it when I read this report. So I have no idea who these people are. I have no idea. And sometimes, Mr. Speaker, Deputy Speaker, it may be a good thing that I am not a man of the street to the extent that you are. I spend a lot of time in the church. So you don't get to know some of these things.
I remember the church is also on the street.
Yes, but I don't know who these principals are. I don't know who these people are. But it is there that a contract is awarded by appropriate and proper method to an entity. Later on, that is changed, seemingly at the urging of ministerial power, by direct communication with the entity, the officials under the charge of that particular ministry. That is in the report, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Also, the situation in reference to the grotto. You know where the grotto is, Mr. Deputy Speaker?
I think I do.
All right. Also in reference to the grotto, and in this instance, Mr. Deputy Speaker, an award of a contract for X amount of dollars to a company called Pre-Conco. I don't know who they are, the principals, Mr. Deputy Speaker. But that seems to be a common entity referenced in this document with frequency. And the contract is awarded for the building of housing development up there at X amount of dollars, 15 million, 18 million, something like that. And then suddenly there's a change, 4 extra units, and there's a change to 28 or 27. I get mixed up with these 27s and 28s, as your member for Christchurch West will tell you. Suddenly there's a change to 27 or 28 million without proper explanation and without going through the proper procedures. That's what I've read in this report. Your report, Mr. Deputy Speaker, from the then Public Accounts Committee. So it is a change. You have reference, Mr. Deputy Speaker, to Coverley as well. I don't want to go into all details. I plan to read this thing. Like I said, I want you to listen to me. I want you to see what's in the document. But reference to Coverley as well, Mr. Speaker, and the price of land and the price attaching to the units sold at Coverley and the financial benefit that comes to government in a questionable context. And I mentioned that to say this, Mr. Deputy Speaker. I don't think the story of Coverley has ever been fully uncovered and told in Barbados. If it has, I have not heard it. But you have to tell us about the arrangements around the land at Coverley. You have to tell us about the arrangements around the sale of units at Coverley. And how, sorry? And how?
5 minutes.
5 minutes more, Mr. Deputy Speaker? Yeah, I wasted too much. I wasted too much on the members St. James, St. James Central. That was a waste. That was a waste. But I'm going to finish now, Mr. Deputy Speaker. And I don't think the issue of Coverley has ever been fully ventilated in Barbados. What is really the arrangements around the land, around the sale of units up there? What monies come back to government out of that arrangement? And that becomes a particularly interesting story when we factor in the now presence or the soon presence of the Ross University element at Coverley. And all I am saying is, I'm not accusing anybody of anything, please. So you can desist from that, Honourable Member St. James said. All I'm saying is, the story of Coverley has never been fully told. And to the extent that the current administration is now entering in or facilitating in or party to new arrangements at Coverley with the same developers and with Ross University, it behoves the government in the interests of openness and transparency to fully tell the story with reference to Ross University's presence in Barbados. Now, if those who sit on the other side would want to see that as an assault on the government, well then so let it be. Mr. Deputy Speaker, I can only tell you it is not. If I stand to say that Coverley and the arrangements relative to that have never been fully exposed in Barbados, in my opinion, if you're now going into added arrangements, it behoves the government. It is in the interest of the party in office to tell us clearly what is happening there. Now, when I say these things, Mr. People think that I'm trying to introduce some slur or I have some nefarious motive. But people meet you on the street, people who think they know or they think they know better than you do, and they say to you, look, do you know this, and do you know that, and you know this, and I don't know this, I don't know that, I don't know that. All I'm saying, Mr. Deputy Speaker, and it is reason and common sense, in the context of a debate such as this, if Coverley has never been fully ventilated to the satisfaction of Barbadians, and you're now putting added dimensions on that issue up there, then it is in your interest and in the public's interest to speak clearly. That is all I am saying. I am going to stop, Mr. Deputy Speaker, before I further incur the wrath of my honourable friend from the West.
Honourable friend, thank you. Member for St. James North.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I am happy to intervene in this debate of the resolution so eruditely laid by my colleague, the Honourable Member for Christchurch South, and contributed to an extremely high level of debate by the Honourable Member for St. James Central, of course, with his special knowledge as well as a member of the then Public Accounts Committee. This is not a debate that ought to have been before this Parliament, because a government that is duly elected by the people of Barbados and a cabinet that is thereafter so constituted ought to govern with transparency, with accountability, with good governance. That should be the norm in the second decade of the 21st century. There should be no debate on that issue. But yet we are here today, sir, because the Public Accounts Committee under the last term of this Parliament, a committee that, of course, is constitutionally and legally established by law since our independence constitution 52 years ago, and of course chaired by the leader of the opposition, and for good reason so. Our founder fathers put that the Public Accounts Committee should be chaired by the leader of the opposition. We are here because that committee found it fit and correctly so to inquire into the reports of the Auditor General in 2013 into the state of a major statutory corporation of this country, the National Housing Corporation. It sought to inquire almost from the time we were constituted as a parliament. Its first meeting was on the 17th of June 2013, just less than 4 months after the 2013 elections. It sought to inquire as to advances of $2.2 million made by the Ministry of Finance to the National Housing Corporation without parliamentary approval or without any agreement for the advancement of this money as contemplated by a law of the Barbados, as has been said by previous speakers on this side, a law of Barbados called the Financial Management and Audit Act, and the regulations made thereunder. An extremely important act, sir, in terms of maintaining the financial integrity of the government and Parliament of Barbados. This, sir, arises then out of the examination of those reports of the Auditor General, and simply because the last government refused to lay this report in Parliament. It had adequate time to do that. They went on past the 11th hour, past closing time in the last session. 5 years gone and they're still holding on. The people spoke towards that, sir, with a resounding victory by this party and consequently a resounding defeat by those in office at the last time. 30 love, as the Honourable Member of St. James Central said, a historical precedent, and that is why we are here today. But let's examine all the malfeasances which stemmed from that. Section 15 of the Public Accounts Committee Public Accounts Committee Act says that a person who is summoned before the committee shall not, without reasonable excuse, and proof of reasonable excuse lies with him. He has, or she has, to prove that they have a reasonable excuse. They shall not fail to appear or to continue in attendance once they have been summoned by that committee. So there's a serious committee. This is not pitching marbles or some kind of foolishness that we, that the Dems will have us understand. This is a serious, major committee of this Parliament of Barbados, the highest court in the land of this country. And it was absolute and total disrespect for 3 cabinet ministers, a minister of finance, a minister of housing, who by then was minister of transport, and a present minister of housing, not to appear before that committee. Absolute disrespect, not of the people of this Parliament, sir, but the people of Barbados who elected them. And to get lawyers to write saying that they're not appearing. And the lawyers, sir, the usual suspects, sir, that transcended the whole DLP administration. The usual suspects. One, former chairman of a tribunal dealing with employment rights issues, gained given a QC just before the 2013 election, which surrounded this whole aspect of things, and then 2 others now given just before last election, all on the eve of elections, as rewards for the messiness and the dirtiness that they did on behalf of the Democratic Labour Party government. You imagine, sir, this side, sir, has about 10 lawyers, sir, all of eminence in their respective fields. I could not imagine any one of my colleagues on this side picking up pen, putting it to paper, and writing a public accounts committee, the most serious and significant committee of the highest court of the land of Barbados, to say that somebody who they're representing, saying that they're their client, will not appear before the committee. And that somebody is a minister of government who is supposed to give total account to the people who elected them to this parliament, sir. Their refusal to come, sir, shows in absolutely clear terms why they are no longer fit. In fact, they were never fit in the first place to be elected to the parliament of this country. And God willing, sir, let us hope they will never see either of them the inside of this parliament again. Because, sir, we are thankful for the Honourable Member for St. Philip North, and the Honourable Member for St. Lucie, and the Honourable Member for St. Michael Northeast, Northwest, who now sit in this Parliament. They have done a national service to this country by removing those 3 persons from the face of this Parliament. Then, sir, there was an attempt, and for this you blame the then Prime Minister. The then Prime Minister, because he was head of the cabinet, he was their leader, to attempt to repeal the act.
That's right. You remember that?
But sir, but this act is one of the most important acts on the laws of Barbados that sit all about this parliament. I think they have 3 sets on this floor. I mean, when I remember, sir, when I first saw that come up before Parliament, Public Accounts Committee Repeal Act 2014. I mean, I really and truly had to put on my glasses, take them off, put on a second set, because I could not believe that a government of the day would seek to repeal a Public Accounts Committee Act. Laid the bill on the 30th of January 2014 for that repeal, holding it like a sword of Damocles over the heads of the opposition, saying that if you're all going to looking into our dirty and messy business that we want to hide up from the people of Barbados, we're going to abolish your period. That is unheard of in the history of parliamentary democracy throughout common law countries and the Commonwealth of which Barbados is a member, sir. But you know, these advances were made to the National Housing Corporation without parliamentary approval. As I said, so this Parliament of Barbados, sir, is not some unelected club that you elect at some place or another within the halls of the DLP. This is a Parliament where all of us, sir, had to go knocking at people's doors asking for votes subject to public scrutiny. Serious place. And you advance monies to a major statutory corporation, sir, of which you were one time the minister with oversight, so you know well about it, without parliamentary approval. The chairman, then chairman, between 2008 and 2013, a close blood relative of the minister at that time, he refused to give evidence to. And he too ought to be ashamed of himself. He's an attorney at law. He ought to know better. But he said, I ain't coming before this committee. And even after the leader of the opposition wrote, the now Honourable Prime Minister of this country, wrote the Speaker of Parliament asking him to write the chairman to come and appear before the committee. And the Speaker, it's true that he took about 6 weeks to write the letter to put pen to paper.
Is it the present Speaker? The present Speaker?
No, sorry, the then Speaker, sir. The Speaker at that time, sir. The then member for St. Michael West, sir, did write the chairman of the NHC, the person who was chairman between 2008 and 2013, telling him he has to appear. But even then, he ignored him. These were demagogues to themselves. Chairman of a board, which is before the Public Accounts Committee, and he not appearing, but doing a lot of dark deals at the 11th hour. The general manager, sir, she gave evidence twice, and then suddenly she is sick in perpetuity. Sick leave certificate on 8 or 9 occasions, sir. And one of these suspect attorneys at law, sir, doing all the dirty work for the Democratic Labour Party government, writing and sending in, saying that she's sick. Well, I mean, the Honourable Member for St. Andrew, the Present Minister of Housing, did what he had to do in terms of her case, sir. Because, you know, sir, I, as an attorney at law, I do criticize lawyers in here regularly. My profession is not beyond criticism, but I also have to criticize the medical profession. Because this thing about a doctor writing sick leave certificates for people, you know, so that they don't come to work, sir, or don't come before a committee, has to be looked at too. Because corrupt practices is corrupt practices, sir, and corruption doesn't only stem in 1 or 2 professions, sir. If it stems in the medical profession, we have to deal with this, because I don't understand how suddenly, whenever a Public Accounts Committee meeting comes and someone you sit for 9 straight times. But this is the kind of nonsense in the names of governance that went on with the last administration. And sir, all erudite legal opinion throughout common law jurisdictions globally, because a legal opinion was sought, and all erudite legal opinions anywhere in countries of similar democratic background as that of this country, tells you that when you are summoned to a Public Accounts Committee hearing, you have to come. You can't contend that you have some kind of privilege and you don't have to go. Their contention, that of the ministers and the chairman, was baseless. Then you had files disappearing, sir, from the corporation. Files suddenly disappearing, can't be found for 8 months. Something that is a criminal offense as far as I'm aware, to hide a file belonging to the government. Lack of transparency, lack of accountability. The simple reality, sir, is that the Minister of Housing in the first term of the Democratic Labour Party, the then Member of Parliament for St. Philip North, and the Cabinet of Barbados broke the law. That is the long and short of it, sir. They broke the law. And you can't be a lawmaker and a lawbreaker too. The two can't come together, sir. They're totally apart. Advances were made. $2.46 million, as the honourable members on this side who spoke before me said, made monthly to the NHC from government from 2010 without parliamentary approval, in breach of the Financial Management and Audit Act. Should have come to Parliament every month. You got to make 2.5 million payments to the NHC to pay the employees who came on there, and other debts. And sir, let's look at this seriously. The then Democratic Labour Party government had a majority in this parliament. In other words, if they had come to parliament for approval because of numbers, they would have won support with our opposition, sir, but they would have had approval for these transfers. So what is the reason why they didn't want to come to parliament to gain approval for these transfers? Why didn't they want the public, the opposition, to know? This is not the way to govern a country, and Mr. Speaker, this is why the people of Barbados hopefully have decided that none of the 30 of those that run for the Democratic Labour Party last election, this year, should see the inside of this parliament at all, at any time in the future. The National Housing Corporation, sir, was effectively insolvent. That's the word used. Bankrupt. Easier word. Because of the Democratic Labour Party's policies. We would have heard earlier in this debate that they employed 200 people between the two elections in 2008 and 2013. 50 more, in addition to the 200, came on, as the Honourable Member for St. James Central said, within the last 2 months of the 2013 election, in unsustainable positions to the Bush NHC lots that they couldn't even get sold. There weren't too many anyway. No money to do that. The Ministry of Finance, sir, in the report said that they didn't give approval. There was no money to pay these people. It was unsustainable. And not surprisingly, immediately after the election, they were sent home. Couldn't be sustained. If you remember, sir, as we all recall, within 10 months of the 2013 election, the National Housing Corporation's staff was cut by close to 50%. This was a Minister of Housing, the then Member of Parliament for St. Philip North, using people, sir, using Barbadians for political ends, for votes. And this is why, and similarly, a lot of deals would have been done within the last 2 weeks of the 2013 election. That minister writing his cousin, the then chairman, saying that he had to give a contract to somebody else. Misleading the whole process, the corporation and everything, without cabinet approval at that time, without the NHC board approval. And it's the National Housing Corporation that ought to have made that decision for then ratification by the cabinet, not the other way around. Nobody beside the chairman of the board apparently knew about all of this. And on a premise that was a lie, that the company previously given the contract couldn't finance the project, which was shown to the committee, Public Accounts Committee, to be not true. That is what went down for governance in this country. They declared a dividend from the Housing Credit Fund to pay $30 million to the contractor. The Honourable Member for St. James Central, and you, my Lord, Mr. Deputy Speaker, as a former Minister of Housing, spoke on these matters, fully aware that no government could declare a dividend on a housing credit fund, a trust fund, and an opinion from government's legal advisors to say that that was illegal, but yet done to pay the contractor at Grotto $30 million. Then, sir, National Housing Corporation, competent lawyers, chief legal officer gave evidence before the committee and competently qualified to have oversight over any legal contract. In fact, that was her job. But because this contract had big money, sir, millions of dollars, and remember, it moved, the contract at the Grotto moved from 18 million to 27, 28 million dollars without any rhyme or reason. 4 extra units built costing $10 million. No explanation given. And the National Housing Corporation has in-house lawyers that get paid monthly, that they don't have to pay extra, who could review that contract between the NHC and the contractors of that development. But yet they give an outside lawyer, a former candidate of the Democratic Labour Party, the contract to review at the cost of $600,000.
What was that you said?
Pardon, sir?
But repeat. I didn't hear exactly what you said.
An external lawyer, sir, lawyer outside the corporation. When the corporation has 2 or 3 attorneys at law, 3 at least, who could easily overview any contract, the qualified. But yet you take that contract and give it to another lawyer, former Democratic Labour Party candidate, sir, to review, and pay him $600,000 or $700,000 to review it. So that's $10 million, sir, additional from Grotto, another $600,000, sir. All of this taxpayers' money that gone through the Edos, declaring a dividend, $30 million gone from the Housing Credit Fund. And all of this, sir, is the reason now why this government's hands are tied. And what you would have heard from the Honourable Member for St. Andrew, that about 20-something thousand people, 25,000 I believe it is, or even more people on a list at the National Housing want to buy land or land and house and can't buy it because the National Housing Corporation is insolvent, bankrupt, has very few houses, very little land that they could sell to Barbadians whose only desire is to own a piece of the rock. But that then member for St. Philip North, sir, he and his cabinet are the reason why the National Housing Corporation right now can't provide houses or housing solutions to Barbadians. They give away covertly, as we heard earlier in this debate, 100-year lease, 99-year lease at $100 annually. 5 whole acres of land, sir. 5 acres of land, 216,000 square feet of land at $100 for 99 years in perpetuity, lawyers would call it. That's what they gave it away for. Totally, that then minister totally breached the financial rules in terms of awarding contracts. We had no authority to do so. Then the report speaks about the slow pace of sale of lands and property. You would recall, sir, that Lancaster I spoke in here as an opposition member of Parliament on it many times, paint up pretty rainbow colors, sitting down for 3 years, unsold, no housing solutions. I pass in it every day because they're near my home. Then they take a decision to transfer units to those living in NHC units for over 20 years, no further funds. They took the decision, sir, but the people most of them still don't have the conveyances. As the Honourable Member for St. Michael Northwest and our friend the Honourable Member for St. Michael's Southeast, Lord be with her, know full well, So no funds coming into the corporation, sir. There was a serious overreach by that minister into the directly into the day-to-day management of the National Housing Corporation, not understanding his role as a minister, sir, not understanding his obligations to the country, to the laws of Barbados, a serious undermining in the integrity of the governance of our country. And the deals made up to the cabinet meeting before the election in 2013, binding a government if there were to be a change of party into the government. And this again happened this year, sir, in this election, where this new Barbados Labour Party administration is now constrained by appointments and reappointments of people in statutory boards, both and in commissions, public service commissions and police service commissions, that bind our hand. This is not right, sir. This is to the detriment of Barbados and its people. Checks and balances need to be put in place, and this is why this Barbados Labour Party in its Covenant of Hope 2016 and in our manifesto speak towards good governance, sir, permitting everyone to have a voice in the decision-making processes and giving the public timely information.
5 minutes more.
Thank you, sir. And giving the public, letting the public know what we are doing, timely and accurate information, holding decision makers accountable, sir, and that's why you have seen the Honourable Prime Minister, sir, speak more, in fact, within her first month as Prime Minister than her predecessor Prime Minister in the Democratic Labour Party spoke in his whole 7 years, 7 months, 7 days as Prime Minister of Barbados, informing the public. We have vowed to be transparent, to be responsive, to be inclusive, to be equitable, because that is what governance is about, sir. And then, sir, what is as bad as everything else that I have said? The Minister of Housing in the last term of office of the Democratic Labour Party, then the Minister, then the Member of Parliament for St. Lucie, he too follows the extremely poor example of his predecessor in that ministry by intruding into the day-to-day affairs of the NHC, to the financial detriment of the corporation and of the people of Barbados. As the Honourable Member, my colleague for St. James Central, said, the directors of the corporation get a valuation, professional valuation, sir, saying that land at Lancaster is worth $65 a square foot. Commercial land. And that individual, sir, who still calls in on brass tacks, I don't know what for, nobody wants to hear him. The people spoke on May the 24th. The right and great people of St. Lucie spoke. And he intervenes and says, no, we're not swapping this land at $65 a square foot. $35 a square foot would do in order to erase the debt to that particular property owner. This now costs the taxpayers of Barbados at $30 a square foot, the difference between 65 and 35, close to $1 million, sir. $1 million. So you add that on to the $600,000 in unnecessary legal fees, to the $10 million additional for Grotto, to the housing credit fund, to everything else, and it adding up and adding up and adding up, sir. And you want to know why the government of Barbados, when we took it over on May 24th, was effectively bankrupt, only $220 million US in foreign reserves, can't pay our overseas debts, and now having to retrench workers, sir. But, sir, there is a case on that on point in my considered legal opinion, sir. The Caribbean Court of Justice, which is the highest court of Barbados, sir, in a case out of Belize, very similar, sir, where two government ministers sold land at an undervalue to their friends. And ultimately, the Caribbean Court of Justice said, can't do that. You two ministers have to pay back the difference in money. You personally liable. $500,000 US, I think it was in that case. Abuse of public office. Misconduct in public office, sir. In my opinion, on all fours with what the then Minister of Housing, the last Minister of Housing under the Democratic Labour Party did. And he, sir, can pay back the $1 million, sir. He always speaks about Moontown, sir. That easy, as I would say. Well, let's get back this $1 million from him, sir, because surely that intervention was a misconduct of an abuse of public office, sir, which has added to the
Can you
cost.
please conclude?
Yes, sir, I will. But, sir, all of this, sir, can be avoided, and this government is committed in our manifesto to establishing the Office of the Contractor General as an independent entity to review contracts of central government and statutory corporations. These kind of actions which took place at the level of the National Housing Corporation and the ministers of housing in conspiracy with the ministers of finance and the cabinet of Barbados ought never ever to happen again in the future history of this country. I thank you, sir.
I beg to move that this sitting be suspended for lunch until 1:45 p.m.
Until 1:45. The question is that this sitting be suspended until 1:45 this afternoon. All members in the favor say aye. Those against say no. I think the ayes have it. This House is now suspended until 1:45 the afternoon.